Did my research, and I should have paid more note to the strangeness of the park's abandonment. It had been, by all measures, a successful business for 20 years. Revenue was growing year on year. The local area had been stunned by the park's notice that it would cease operations in late '97. But as I said, I was young and dumb. I didn't think about the suspiciousness of a successful business abruptly closing down. I was simply glad to see the bare-bones framework of a theme park already close to operational, needing only some safety checks and light maintenance before it was ready to go. And with the name Fun Kingdom still being in people's minds, and the popularity of the place only 4 years prior, I saw this as a no-lose investment. The previous owners had done all the work for me. Here was a tried and tested business model, ready to go, and all I needed to do was buy my way in. The information at the bottom of the advert should certainly have clued me in to the peculiarity of it all. Ring the following number to talk price. No time wasters. Looking for immediate sale. I rang the number. A man answered.
Herbert Smith, how may I help you?
Hi, I said. My name is Fred Langley. I'm calling about the ad in the paper for Fun Kingdom. I'm an interested buyer.
Fantastic. Would you like for me to arrange an appointment between our lawyers?
But I wasn't a complete fool. Well, before all of that, I was wondering whether I might be able to book a viewing of the park itself. There hung a few moments of silence in the air, heavy, and then Herbert sighed.
Did you read the advert, Fred?
I did.
So you saw the part about an immediate sale.
This was strange, even to an investor as young and inexperienced as me. Well, yeah, I saw that, I said, but...
And no time wasters.
Well, yes, I saw that part too. But surely you understand why I would want to actually view the property before we talk contracts. I mean, I need to know what I'm actually buying. You wouldn't buy a house without viewing it first, would you? All I have to go by is the text. You didn't include any pictures in the...
All right,
Herbert interrupted. He sounded beyond frustrated. His earlier relief at my having called at all was long gone. I should have hung up the phone there and then.
Fine. We'll arrange a viewing at Fun Kingdom today.
I raised my brows. Today? He sighed.
Oh, for the love of...
No, today's fine, I said. Why was this dude being such a tool? I was just shocked that you could squeeze me in so soon.
How does 2 o'clock work for you?
He asked.
The sun will be setting soon. We'll want to be quick.
Sure, that gives me about a half an hour to drive over. I'll see you then.
Right. And we'll talk contract while you're there.
I didn't want to tell him that this was all a little premature, as I'd already been scolded for time-wasting once, so I simply opted to say nothing, and the man hung up the call. I let out a long breath, realizing that I had been holding it for a few seconds. I had never had such a struggle with business dealings in the past, but I reminded myself that my other fairgrounds, bought with Papa's money, had all been small fry. The dealings had been simple because there wasn't much to the land and the equipment involved. Fun Kingdom, on the other hand, was a large theme park. I had been there as a kid with my father, and it had blown me away. This would be by far the biggest investment that I had ever made, and it would take my empire to dizzying new heights. I was sure of that. I was willing to swallow my pride a little and deal with this grouchy old curmudgeon, Herbert Smith, just to get my hands on Fun Kingdom. And then again, he was the one who sounded desperate. His frustration was coming only from the fact that I wouldn't sign the contract sooner. wouldn't sign it without question. It was beyond bizarre to expect an investor to buy property without even viewing it. These were the early days of the internet, so there wasn't even a Fun Kingdom website to view, to get a good look at the current state of the place. I had seen it back in its heyday, but I knew that it wouldn't be quite in the same condition after 4 years left to gather dust. I wanted to see whether it fit the bill before rushing into a decision, even though I was fairly certain that I would still buy the property, even if it were a run-down and ramshackle mess. The inspection was more for the sake of maintaining my image as a serious buyer in truth. I was more than happy to rush through the proceedings and sign on the dotted line. I'm glad I didn't. I pulled into the car park a few minutes before 2 o'clock in the afternoon, as gray clouds were parting to let the winter sun through. That was a good omen, I hoped. And the sun was starting to climb down from the sky, casting long shades from the tall castle walls, bracing either side of the wrought iron gate, above which Fun Kingdom was spelled in bold, rusting letters. And despite me being early, Herbert was already impatiently tapping his foot against the weed-ridden tarmac of the car park, arms folded as he waited for me to park up and get out. I hurried over to the old man with disheveled gray hair and rimmed glasses, and I tried my best to mend the wounds of our admittedly rocky start. "Hey Herbert, I'm Fred." "Obviously." "Right. Yeah, he was going to continue to be an ass. Best to just get through this as painlessly as possible," I decided. "So, shall we take a quick look around?" I asked, putting the emphasis on quick. And Herbert seemed to like that, as his sulk very nearly curled up into a smile, but stopped at a horizontal line. I would take that as neutral and nonchalant was better than grouchy. "This way," he said, motioning with a hand as he led me over to the gate. He fumbled with a set of keys and thrust one into the padlock. Which then came open with a not-so-satisfying groan, as if wondering why anybody would bother to return to this place. And it was, I quickly realized, in a dire condition. The car park was the precursor. The entrance to the theme park was all cracked past, spilling out weeds and moss and boarded-up concession stands. The dodgems were vandalized with graffiti, featuring a number of creative expletives from youths who had broken into the theme park over the years. The wooden roof of one stall had crumbled inwards, perhaps in one of the heavy storms that we had the year prior. "Oh, it just needs a bit of TLC," Herbert said, hurrying me along the weed-ridden path. "It really is a steal. We're only asking for $50,000. And that perked me up. I had surely misheard him. $50,000. Yep. As a deposit? I asked. No, that's the total sum. $50,000 and the entire place is yours. The whole park? That doesn't sound right, sir. Well, it is. He said, coming to a stop outside the walls to the inner castle, which had always been one of my favorite sections of the park. It was home to terrifyingly tall roller coasters and the ghost train and even jousting shows. But Herbert didn't seem keen to go any farther. So does that mean you're ready to sign? I have the contracts in my car ready for you to look them over, and we could arrange for our lawyers to meet up in the evening. No, just slow down, I said again, raising my hands. I'm not going to be able to get my lawyer involved at such short notice. Tomorrow maybe if I give him a call. Herbert groaned, and so I continued. I'm not wasting your time. I promise, I just want to do this properly. The old man frowned but nodded. Fine, tomorrow. Just as long as you're not messing around. I've had too many people mess me around over the past few years. pulling out at the last second. I finally asked a sensible question. Why do you think that is? He narrowed his eyes, as if beside himself that I would even ask a follow-up question. Why do I think that is? Because people are unreliable. Why do you think this place closed down in the first place? It had everything going for it. We had everything going for us. And then one person complains and, well, I'm sure you saw all that nonsense in the paper back in '97. In all honesty, I didn't. And I was confused to see that this place had shut down. I used to love it as a kid. Herbert perked up at this. Well, that's because Fun Kingdom was the greatest theme park in the country. And maybe it will be again with you at the helm. I assume you're wanting to keep it as a theme park. Of course. Good. That's good. But I was scared to ask, as it was nice to see Herbert temporarily in a good mood. But his temperament fluctuated with the weather. The gray clouds had returned, and we were nearing that time on a late winter's afternoon at which the scarce sunlight was doing nothing to light the way. The old man took out his torch and flickered it on. It gets so dark at this time of year, he said, and then he frowned at me. You were going to say something. You mentioned the park shut down because of some nonsense. What happened? Oh, some kids and adults went missing in town. And one woman had the nerve to put the blame on Fun Kingdom. She went to the police with her thoughts, and they did a lazy investigation that joined the dots and raised some flags about the correlation between missing persons and people who had visited Fun Kingdom on the day of their disappearance. But every damn person in this town visited Fun Kingdom on the regular. It propped up the entire economy. He sighed. Anyway, the chief of police was going to draw a line under the whole thing, but the fiasco was starting to draw the attention of the national press. So Michael Englandton, the owner of Fun Kingdom, decided it was best to close the gates until things calmed down. And things never did calm down. So he skipped town and started selling off his assets. He left me here to hold the bag. And that brings us to today. I've spent 4 years trying to sell this place, but buyers never want to close on the deal. That's why I'm hoping you're not going to mess me around, young man. You're good for the money, I presume, because at this point, I'll take just enough to get me out of this place and to keep me from bankruptcy for good measure. I'm good for the money, I said. For $50,000, I think anybody would be good for the money. I paused. So those missing people, they never found them. Not that I'm aware, but like I said, the chief of police drew a line under the nonsense. There was no evidence that they had gone missing on the Fun Kingdom property. Blaming us was a low blow. We handed out cheap tickets like candy most summers. The kids and adults alike snatched them up. They'd be coming in and out all day, every day. We were an easy target for the case, I suppose, but... Well, anyway, that horridness is all over now. And the local area hasn't had any incidents since that strange summer. Probably some drug-addled lowlife killed a bunch of people, buried the bodies, and got arrested on some other charges. I widened my eyes. You, speak pretty frankly, Herbert. I'm old, Fred. I'm old and tired. I don't have time to waste. No, you've made that rather clear by this point, I thought to myself. But I kept my comments to myself, because I seemed to be making a bit of headway with the man. He had softened. He had answered my biggest question about why the park shut down, and I was convinced that there was nothing to worry about, given the police had ruled out foul play on the Fun Kingdom property. It would perhaps take a little bit of PR work to fix the brand's image and get people back through the gates, but I imagined that it could be doable, as long as no nut jobs came out of the woodwork to blame the park for those unexplained disappearances from 4 years ago. I'm not here to waste your time, Herbert, I promised. I'm still interested in the park. Sounds to me like that ugliness from 4 years ago was a whole load of nothing. The old man smiled. Too right. Now should we head out? I can give you a copy of the contracts to look over, and we'll get our lawyers into the office tomorrow. Sure, but do you mind letting me have a quick peek inside the inner castle first? I used to love it as a kid. Herbert looked unsure for a moment, but my smooth talking had worked, because the old man nodded, and uncharacteristically for him, he didn't chew my ear off for daring to want to actually inspect the property. A little bit of flattery and a slight white lie could get a man anywhere. I had learned that over the years. The man fished out his keys and took us over a drawbridge over an empty moat that used to be filled with water but was now filled with smashed liquor bottles and even a rusting shopping trolley. He then unlocked the second set of gates, which took us into the inner castle. Walled on all sides by a faux castle that included gift shops and the ghost train ride and even a small cinema. Even with moss and vines climbing the walls and shooting through the paths below our feet, I still felt a sense of childlike wonder to be back in this favorite place of mine from my childhood. My eyes went up to the staggering heights of the Red Death roller coaster. At the far side of this gargantuan inner courtyard between the tall walls of the castle, and then went down to the sad sight of the many smaller rides that look rusted and forlorn. There would be some serious maintenance required to fix up these gems from my childhood. Not even the rosy hue of nostalgia could blind me to how much work needed to be done. I was fortunate, I realized, that Herbert was asking for such a sickeningly low price for Fun Kingdom. It would take a significant investment to get the park back up to scratch and ready to be opened. I wagered it would be at least a year before I could open the gates to the public. Herbert smiled as he clocked me scanning my surroundings and likely saw the cogs in my brain working. He likely saw in my eyes that I was in fact a serious buyer and that I had done everything but sign my name on the contract. He seemed to relax a little now, realizing that I wasn't like the other buyers. You liked this place when you were a kid, huh? He asked. Yeah, I came here with my dad all the time. Good. I'd much rather sell it to a local. As I said, I've had some idiots mess me around over the years. They take a look at the place and they just... Herbert stopped, as if catching himself before saying something that he ought not to say. Well, they must be put off by the weeds and the vines and the rust and such. It'll take a little bit of money to get it back into shape, but I'm sure you can do it, Fred. I see the love in your eyes. I didn't think much of how Herbert talked about these other prospective buyers who had dropped out at the last minute. And I certainly didn't think about the fact that they had seen this place in person too. These are all things that seem clear to me upon reflection. But I'm an older man now. I'm a wiser man. I have a little bit of that fear in me, just as Herbert had that day. I have that twitch, always scanning my surroundings for things lurking out of the corner of my vision, just as he had. For me, it all started that day. It all started as I passed the dark entrance to my favorite ride from my childhood, above which hung a wooden sign with the words, Ghost Train. There was movement from within, just a flicker of movement, a yellow shape in the black. It was almost imperceptible in the dim light of an overcast late afternoon as we neared dusk, and by the time Herbert had brightened the spot which drew my gaze, filling the shadowy entrance of the ghost train with his torchlight, the yellow had gone. Herbert was stammering more than ever, struggling to catch up to his breathing. We ought to leave now, Fred. It's getting dark. The sunlight will be gone in half an hour or so. I might not have thought much of that yellow blur. I might have chalked it up to my eyes playing tricks on me. It could have been the reflection of Herbert's torch glow catching something. It could have been any myriad of things. But I knew from the horrified look on the old man's face that it was something of which he was well aware, something that he was hiding from me, something that he had been hiding from me since the beginning. As I said, I was young and foolish, but not entirely stupid. "What was that, Herbert?" I asked. "Nothing," he said, motioning back towards the gates with his torch. "Come on, let's go home now." "Was somebody in there?" I pressed. "A squatter, perhaps. One of the vandals who had graffitied those dodgems. It's okay, Herbert, I just want you to be honest with me." "Are you a serious buyer, Fred?" "You know I am, and we've gone over this a dozen times, but if..." I had to choose my words carefully. Something wasn't right about that yellow shape, and if I were to get answers, I would need to tread carefully and not get on Herbert's bad side again. "When I become the owner of this park, I'll need to know about trespassers who have been causing a nuisance for you over the past 4 years, won't I? I'll need police help to clear them out." Herbert seemed assuaged by this. "Right, of course. Well, we can discuss all of that back at my office." "So, was it a squatter?" Herbert didn't reply. He led me back to the gate, and I realized that I wasn't going to get a good answer out of him, and I was feeling quite cold all of a sudden. The wind hadn't really picked up, but some instinct of mine had. I had ignored all the stories that Herbert told of the park's past, and I had ignored the rundown nature of the property. But I couldn't ignore this. That yellow blur. The more that I thought on it, it hadn't looked right at all. It had been quick. Far too quick. It had to be a squatter, I told myself. And if Herbert had answered me, I would have believed that. I would have been persuaded. But his silence struck me with terror. And we made it back to the gate through which we had entered the inner castle. But Herbert was frozen at the padlock, with his keys in hand. "No," he said. No. "No what? What's wrong?" I came to a stop beside him and I looked down to see the man holding a second metal padlock beside the first. It was a padlock that hadn't been there when we had first arrived. Somebody had locked us in. "Is this a joke?" I asked. I wanted to ask whether it was the squatter or one of his friends, but I was scared to keep asking questions. I was scared because I knew that Herbert would crack soon and tell me what I already knew deep in my gut. It wasn't a squatter, and something was very wrong with this place. I should have left when I had the chance, like those other prospective buyers. Herbert frantically dialed a number on his bulky cell phone and tapped his foot as he waited for someone to pick up. "Alicia, yeah, it's me, I'm at the park. Yeah, with a buyer. Listen, Steven hasn't been over to the park today, has he?" He paused to let her answer and then swore under his breath. "No, I'm fine, I just..." He stopped to smile at me awkwardly, but it was too late to pretend. I was seeing through the whole charade now. "Just, head over here with the bolt cutters, will you? I think somebody's, playing a little prank on us. There's a fresh padlock on the gate. And just a cheap set of bolt cutters will cut through it. Ask Mikey at the store." "No, you don't understand, it's a fresh padlock, a brand new one. Somebody put it there, I don't have the keys for it." "I know," he screamed. And then he cleared his throat and he smiled at me again apologetically. "Sorry, Alicia, sorry. I'm not cross at you, I just..." "Good, thank you. Yeah, as soon as possible, please." Herbert hung up the phone and gulped, casting his torch over my shoulder at the darkening inner castle. Dusk had well and truly arrived, and nightfall would be soon upon us. "So Alicia's on her way to let us out?" I asked in a croak. "Yeah, with some bolt cutters. We'll be fine." He was trying to convince himself more than me, I realized, as his eyes weren't meeting mine. He was casting the torch through the gate at the drawbridge on the other side, trying to search for anyone who might be out there. How long will she be? I asked. Oh, 20 minutes maybe. If she goes to Mikey for a set of bolt cutters first. The office is only a few minutes away. We waited 20 long minutes, until night had come and Herbert's torch was the only light that we had. But Alicia did not arrive, and Fun Kingdom was starting to lose its nostalgic aura. It was starting to become a different place, which I did not recognize in the slightest. I was becoming more like Herbert by the second, scanning those dark crevices just outside the reach of the torch glow, and twitching nervously as I told myself that I was imagining shapes moving in those shadowy unlit patches of the inner castle. Herbert rang Alicia after another 10 minutes, but the call went to voicemail, so he rang the office instead. Hey Steven, there you are. Where's Alicia? A long pause and his wide eyes said it all. She's not here. Right. So she got the bolt cutters from Mikey, but are you sure she said that she was coming here? Maybe she had an errand to run first. And then he was shouting again. Yeah, Steven, I know I said it was an emergency, but Alicia's not always the sharpest tool now, is she? Look, you need to get over here. Yeah, now. Well, I don't know what to tell you, Steven, but she isn't here. Can't your wife go get your boy instead? This is an emergency, Steven. What? Don't you? Fine. We'll fetch the police then. Just anybody, or I'll call them myself if I have to. But my battery's getting low and you're right next door to the sheriff's office, so... He breathed a sigh of relief. Thank you, Steven. Yeah, get the chief over here now. Herbert hung up and pocketed the phone, and then he cast his torch around the unlit courtyard of the inner castle again, breathing a second sigh of relief as his glow caught no shapes moving about in the darkness. Good, that's good. Now we just need to wait for the chief of police to get here. What happened to Alicia? I asked. I don't know. Herbert snapped at me, and then he regained his composure. Sorry. I'm sorry, Fred. I was starting to lose my patience with the man. I mean, surely this gate isn't the only way out. We can't be walled and gated in. Well, we are. I guess you'll need to get this place up to code when you take over. And when I take over, I murmured. Sure. There was no chance that that was going to happen anymore. Some use had locked us into the inner castle, and now Alicia wasn't picking up her phone, despite having told Steven that she was heading here. So my mind was racing with possibilities. Horrible, horrible possibilities. What was the yellow shape that I had seen in the darkness? Tell me the truth, Herbert, I said. I think I deserve that, don't you? You're not telling me what we saw on the entrance to the ghost train. Herbert surprised me. He didn't shrug off my question this time, or at least he didn't shrug it off in quite the same way. It's best you don't know, he admitted defeatedly, giving up once again on his dream of convincing a prospective buyer to sign the contract for Fun Kingdom. All you need to know is that we're not safe here, and we should be hoping that Chief Jameson is already on his way over here, because we're running out of time. I frowned. Running out of time? Look, you're afraid of these squatters, and I'm afraid of them too now. So let's put our heads together. Let's think. There must be some other exit. There isn't. I don't mean an official way out, not a fire exit or something. Just come on, we could go into the castle walls and shimmy down into the moat from one of the windows or something. I laughed. Of course, then we would be stuck in a moat. Well, there is a drainage tunnel that cuts back out to a nearby road. Herbert frowned. But that sounds dangerous. And you just said that staying here was dangerous. So which would be worse? Waiting for the chief or trying to make our own way out? The old man was getting quite flustered now, looking around as if something might be in the shadows. Yeah, all right, let's head inside. Just stick close to me in the light. And be careful. I nodded and led the way to the door to the gift shop, and into the castle we went. Once he had cast his light around at the aisles and we had seen no squatters were in there, the old man seemed a little more at ease. I certainly felt better inside. With castle walls to protect us, what fears should we really have? I was shocked, of course, that there were no fire exits or doors that let us out other than the main gates. I made a mental note that it would be one of the first things that I would fix, and then I reminded myself to wake up, and that I couldn't possibly be moronic enough to invest in such a dangerous place. Hopefully Alicia was okay, and hopefully kids were just pranking us. But hope didn't settle me. I knew the truth. I knew something was not right with Fun Kingdom, and with the setting of the sun, I saw that it was not the place that I had come to love in my childhood. I understood why Herbert had been so keen to hurry me out before the antics began. Squatters, I told myself again as we worked through the gift shop, lit by Herbert's torch. It's only squatters, and this is just an old man who's had his fill of delinquents terrorizing him over the years. And hey, I didn't blame him. But Alicia would be found, the squatters would be arrested, and all of this would be swept under the rug. And maybe once I had calmed myself down, I would even convince myself that this was a good investment after all. But that yellow shape in the dark, I couldn't stop thinking about that yellow shape. The windows at the far side of the gift shop overlooked the moat, and as the man scrubbed away some of the muck and filth from the old glass pane, he started to nod, entertaining my idea. It's not much of a drop," he said, starting to open the window. But now I was having second thoughts. Hey, maybe this is a dumb idea. The chief will probably be here in a minute. Besides, we can't exactly jump straight down without breaking our legs or something. We need to fashion a rope, I suppose. Herbert nodded in agreement, so we began to look around the gift shop but found nothing suitable. And then we wandered out into the castle corridor, and the moment that we left the gift shop behind us, there came the sound of a door slamming. It reverberated around the walls of the inner castle building, which looped in a square around the courtyard, and sounded to come from both the left and the right. It was impossible to know from which way the door slammed, and it was impossible to know from which way the footsteps were coming. Loud clunking, grinding footsteps. Hardly footsteps at all. Herbert gasped and grabbed my arm. "We need to hide, now." "Is this person really that dangerous?" I asked. "Oh, there's more than one." "All right, well, the chief of police will sort them out. We need more than a small-town cop. We need an armed military unit." I frowned. "For squatters?" "Oh, they're not squatters." Herbert turned off the torch and dragged me into one of the rooms and shut the door behind us. It seemed to be a security office with a dusty monitor on its desk and a forgotten computer beneath. And as he hurried us underneath, knocking over the old PC in the process, I heard those clunking footsteps approaching. There was such a strangely heavy thump and thunk to them, but they were footsteps. I had no idea how else to describe them. They just weren't shoes. They weren't bare feet slapping against stone tiles either. What were they? The footsteps stopped in the corridor outside the security office, and the two of us waited under that desk, holding our breaths. We waited for the clunking of feet to start again, but they didn't. There was silence in the inner castle, outside our pitch-black security office, but it was a weighty silence. It was one that I didn't trust. That person was out there, not a squatter. A person with heavy, impossible feet. I wanted us to wait until the sun came up. The chief of police wasn't coming for us, that much was clear. There were no sirens outside. There were no voices from the cavalry come to cut us free from the gate padlocked to keep us inside. There was Herbert and there was me. and there was someone outside the door. I wanted to explain this to the old man, but he didn't seem to understand. He chose to hope blindly that the terror had passed. After a few minutes of sitting in unsufferable silence, the man crawled out from his hiding hole and turned on the torch. I didn't even dare whisper for him to get back down, because the slightest sound would have given us away. I was sure that even the shuffle of him clambering up and the click of his torch turning on would have given us away. The person was still out there. That was what I wanted to tell him. He was too desperate to see that. Too desperate for us to find that rope, which we would scale the castle walls and escape to freedom through a drainage tunnel. Herbert abandoned caution and threw open the door to the security office. There was a moment's pause in which I wondered whether I had blown the whole ordeal out of proportion. And then came a metal limb and a yellow frilly sleeve, reaching into the room and seizing the old man by the neck. I put a hand to my mouth as Herbert screamed, and watched his metal fingers closed around his neck and drain the life from his eyes. And then came a resounding snap as the bone was broken and the old man's scream was extinguished. His limp body was then dropped to the ground. Tears filled my eyes as I kept my hands against my mouth, muffling any sound that might try to slip out, and the metal arm and its yellow sleeve retracted, and the sound of receding footsteps finally filled the air. I waited until the metal thing sounded distant enough, and then I made my exit. I scooped Herbert's fallen torch from the ground and went to the open door to the security office, and I peered out into the unlit corridor, casting the light both ways. My chest loosened a little as the glow caught nothing, so I made my way back to the gift shop. I was about ready to give up on our plan to escape. I was about ready to go back into the courtyard and try my best to scale that wrought iron gate, as impossible as that would have been. There was a slight gap between its top and the stone castle wall, so I told myself that that could have given me a way out, and maybe it could have. But I didn't make it a single step into the courtyard. In the open doorway between the gift shop and the outside world was a young woman in a yellow sundress, only she wasn't a woman at all, and I realized that I had recognized her from my youth. I recognized her from the ghost train ride. She was the animatronic at the end of the circuit, who stuck out arms and pleaded with the riders for salvation, pleaded to be freed from her ghost train prison. It seemed she had finally received her wish. I screamed and dashed across the gift shop, cutting through the aisles towards the windows on the far side, torch glow bouncing as my arms whirred like pistons. I saw in the reflection of the glass pane that the woman was on all fours, limbs slamming into these stone tiles behind me, and she knocked over a shelving unit atop her, buying me a moment more time to escape as she tried to shake off the falling gift shop items and regain her footing. I went to the castle window that Herbert had opened and glanced behind me to see the animatronic woman approaching on all fours, like a well-garbed animal, and screeched in terror as I hoisted myself over the bottom of the window frame. I gripped both hands around the stonework, sliding my body down, and there I hung over the edge, looking down at the moat about 15 feet below. There was no time to find a rope or a ladder or some way of getting down safely. I was thinking about how to drop without twisting an ankle, but there was no time to think either. That robot woman, whose paint had rusted over the years to leave behind only a metallic dome, opened her jaws wide and brought those metal gnashers down on my hands. She cut right through the bone and down to the other side, severing my fingers. I fell screaming into the moat, and I landed on my ankle painfully. Rolling over onto it and then falling to my side. My entire body was throbbing in excruciating agony, And even then, only adrenaline kept me from fully appreciating the level of pain which truly riddled my entire body. I had to survive. The thing in the yellow dress was above me, looking down at my mangled form at the bottom of the drained moat, and likely licking its metallic lips in hunger, wanting more of me than just fleshy digits. With a mangled hand and left ankle and a torch gripped loosely in my right hand, I hobbled my way around the moat, and I found the grate to the sewage drain. I felt a surge of relief that the grate was not bolted to the wall. It swung open with a light pull, but then came the smash of glass and the thunk of something large and metal landing in the moat, just around the corner from view. I realized that the torch would only draw it to me, so I dropped it at the entrance to the tunnel, and I made my way into the pitch black, pursued by clunking footsteps. It was 100 yards to the street. The street lamps marked the hole at the end, where the tunnel went out into a river, and a grassy embankment would take me up to the road. Just 100 yards, no distance at all. But tiptoeing through the dark with the clunks of an approaching beast scouring the black for me made those 100 yards feel more like 1,000. I clung to the walls, I crawled on the floor, I zigged and zagged and held my breath, and I used every tool at my disposal to remain hidden as the metal creature got right at my heels. And then I made it. I was out on the river. I looked back to see a blank metal face staring at me from the dark of the tunnel, and then they slipped back into it. I never contacted the owners of Fun Kingdom again. I never contacted the police. I never went back to the town. I ran and never looked back.